The US is on the edge of something unimaginable. It's deeply concerning and frankly outrageous that we've reached this point. It looks like the neoconservatives in Washington have had their way, and we're just one step from a major escalation in the Middle East. A conflict between Iran and Israel is serious on its own, but if the US joins in, the consequences could spiral. As observers and investors, it's crucial to grasp what's unfolding. This conflict could bring the US economy closer to a crisis. Even if America claims a win, the economic and human cost could be devastating both domestically and across the Middle East. We've all seen the White House's aggressive posture. Trump is now demanding Iran's unconditional surrender and claims to know where Iran's supreme leader is hiding. But here's what's truly disturbing. He's reportedly ignoring intelligence that contradicts his views, including from Tulsi Gabbard, who said Iran doesn't currently possess nuclear weapons. Trump, however, believes otherwise, raising the stakes dangerously. This war wouldn't resemble Ukraine-Russia. Troop deployments would mean massive casualties. Instead, we could see widespread missile strikes. You don't need to be a military expert to understand how deeply damaging this would be, especially to the US economy. Pro-war voices like Lindsey Graham are getting louder. These interventionists are calling for heavy bombings, saying diplomacy has failed. Trump, who thrives on projecting strength, likely won't back down, even if doing so would make economic sense. The economic fallout could be massive. Beyond the cost of war itself, the destruction of Iran's oil infrastructure could spike global oil prices. If Iran retaliates by targeting major shipping routes, inflation could surge. RBC Capital warns US markets might drop 20% in such a scenario. With oil potentially hitting triple digits, consumer confidence and spending would collapse, hitting corporate earnings and dragging down the S&P potentially below 5,000 points. This would hurt everyday investors, even those far from the battlefield. But there's historical precedent for this. Back in 2013, analysts estimated a bombing campaign against Iran without ground troops could cost at least $1,700 billion, 0 cents. Adjusted for inflation and today's realities, that number could easily double or triple. Where would the US get this money? From more debt. And as history shows, wars funded by borrowing lead to monetary debasement. We're already seeing that play out. Biden's Ukraine spending pushed the deficit to 6.4% of GDP, and that was a proxy war. A direct conflict would force the Fed into a bind, cut rates to help the government borrow more cheaply, or resume bond buying, QE, to suppress yields. Foreign investors are watching and they're not impressed. If the US goes to war, global faith in the dollar could crumble further. International investors are already scaling back their Treasury purchases. As yields rise, the Fed may be forced to intervene even more aggressively, further weakening the dollar. Meanwhile, we're stretching our finances dangerously thin. The US is facing trade wars, budget blowouts, and now a potential military conflict all at once. This could push the entire system to a breaking point. If the dollar continues falling, inflation could accelerate and erode real returns for investors. Gold over $3,000? 0 cents? Not a coincidence. Wall Street expects more dollar weakness. When Trump first took office, the dollar rallied in anticipation of reform. But as he escalated tariffs and isolated the US economically, confidence fell. War with Iran would only intensify that trend. The US is dismantling the virtuous cycle of dollar dominance. Foreign earnings once flowed into US assets, stocks and treasuries, helping keep borrowing costs low and demand high. Now, tariffs and poor trade policy are reversing that. As other countries recycle fewer dollars back into the US, they're growing stronger domestically, investing in gold, local bonds, and their own economies. If trust in the dollar breaks further, the fallout will be severe. Foreign holders of US assets could dump them, forcing interest rates even higher. That scenario, high inflation with rising rates, is disastrous for a debt-heavy country. And let's talk about a potential new banking crisis. In a desperate move, US regulators are now considering easing capital requirements for big banks, encouraging them to buy more treasuries. This essentially amounts to a bailout not of the banks, but of the government. The risk? Massive. Banks like JP Morgan and Bank of America could be overexposed to long-dated treasuries. If yields spike or the dollar dives, those holdings will suffer hard. This fragility in the financial system is compounded by China or others potentially dumping US debt in response. We could face the worst of all worlds, recession with rising rates like an emerging market collapse. That's why a war with Iran is not just morally complex, it's financially reckless. And yet here we are, with Trump playing coy. Will he strike Iranian nuclear facilities or not? He won't say. The ambiguity is alarming, and the consequences potentially catastrophic. So, what do you think? Will the US get involved militarily with Iran? And can we really afford another war, economically or otherwise? Drop your thoughts in the comments, stay safe, and make sure to like and subscribe as we navigate through these uncertain times.